Middle school is a transitional time when your kids have moved beyond the years of early learning and are moving towards greater independence. It's a time when expectations change and you start looking towards the future. If you're wondering how to master middle school, you're in the right place. My name is Sunny. I am a Sonlight mom of 2 children. My oldest is in middle school currently, but both of my kids have been educated with Sonlight since preschool. And joining me today are Jen and Christy. Jen, do you want to tell us about yourself?
Hi, I am Jen. I have homeschooled all 4 of my kids from the beginning. We've used Sonlight the whole time. I have 2 graduates, one in high school and one just finishing 7th grade. So I've done middle school a couple of times.
For sure. Christy, what do you tell us about you?
Okay, I'm Christy. This is my 14th year coming up using Sonlight. And my guys started years ago. My oldest started in 1st grade, started out with Sonlight. That was our first year of homeschooling. And 14 years later, we love it. I have one son who is away in college, and I have 2 high schoolers and 1 middle schooler currently this year.
Well, perfect. I'm so glad you guys are here. Let's go ahead and kind of jump into this middle school conversation. For people, whether they're new to Sonlight or maybe their kids are approaching this age, there's so many levels to choose from, which is great because it gives you a lot of options. But sometimes that can be a little confusing because we don't just have one 7th grade level. So how do you choose what level to put your student in? And what do you do if you want to do, more levels than you have time for?
Well, sometimes there are more levels than you have time for. I mean, I planned my oldest, middle school schedule around the Sonlight offerings then, and now there are more. So, it's kind of, do we work in J? Do we not? What do we do? So, the first couple of rounds of middle school, I just did the next thing. For my last one, I actually rearranged. So we did, after we did D and E, we did G and then H and then F, for the reason that F requires a lot more writing than the Eastern Hemisphere notebook. And I just knew he was not ready. So 2 years later, he was totally ready and thought F was fantastic and easy. So, sometimes you just do the next thing and sometimes you got to tweak.
Yeah, I would say it depends on what you need. If you have other children, if you're combining. So if you need American history, then you have a couple of options. You could pair with younger, or if you have a single child that is maybe on the younger end in middle school, you can do D+E, 1 year of American history. That's a great option for early middle school. And maybe you want to save that 100 level for high school. It's important to know that 100 level is the final American history that Sonlight offers. And so, if you want that on your high school transcript and you don't plan to do more than a 4-year plan, then maybe you want to save that for freshman year. It's a great freshman year subject. And so that's one thing I would say. If you need world history, you have options as well. For middle school, I would say G, the first half of world history, H, the second half, or W, 1 year of world history. And I have done a combination with my 4 children of a lot of different options, just whatever I needed at the time. Combining was one of the, if I needed to combine someone, that was one of the big factors that I used to decide what I wanted on the high school transcript. I kind of looked at that and then kind of worked backwards for high school, especially towards the end of middle school. And F or J, those were basically used if I had time and interest. And so for F, I do think I wanted to get that in with my oldest because I had never done it before. And I loved it so much. And it helped me and him to understand World War II better, understand world history better, to really get time in the Eastern Hemisphere. It was really helpful subject-wise. But really, for some of my guys, I just couldn't fit F in, and they were okay with that. And so we just moved on to world history or whatever it is they needed. So yeah, lots of factors going on.
Yeah, and I think too, paying attention to what your kids are interested in. I know when Level J first came out, my daughter was not middle school age yet and was all excited and, ooh, I can't wait to do that. And in order to do that, we would have had to cut F or do W, the combined world history, to get her there. Well, then as she got a little older and started thinking about it, she's like, I actually think I would like world history better than history of science. And so she elected to do G and H instead. And so, yeah, I think looking at the interest of your kids, your interest as well, I have found I like teaching the programs that work chronologically through history better than the ones that jump to the different countries like A, F, or I assume J. We haven't done that one, so we'll see. So that kind of helped too. But yeah, kind of looking at what your kids need, what you enjoy learning or teaching about is a good way to pick that program that you're going to use. Let's talk a little bit about the time commitment needed as your kids get a little bit older and the workload. Some people think there's a huge step up as you get into these older programs, and others it feels a little more transitional. But what would you say is kind of an average amount of time that children are spending in middle school on their schoolwork, or, you know, does the workload feel a lot tougher?
I didn't find that it was a lot tougher. When I look back now, in retrospect, I can see that middle school was about double the time commitment that we had in the elementary years and about half of the commitment that it was in high school. So, you know, more in that 3-4 hour range. The reading is long. Middle school was when we started to accept the idea that audiobooks were going to be part of our life. You know, in elementary school, I was like gung ho, I'll read it all. It's fine. I can do it. And then middle school came along and I was like, okay, I need help. We have to get somebody else to read some of this. I can listen a lot longer than I can read aloud, especially when I had other programs going with younger ones. Some of the time commitment things aren't in the HBL. The math gets longer. Like one math assignment is much longer than it was in 3rd grade. The science, the reading gets longer. Of course, science experiments get more complicated. And the writing, instead of like write a paragraph, it's now write an essay. And so there are some things that take longer. Of course, middle school was when things like spelling and handwriting dropped off for us. And so it was balance. And every kid is different. I had one that still needed spelling in middle school and 3 that didn't. So your mileage may vary.
Yes. I would say getting an agenda or a schedule for especially my most organized guys, that helps them and they love it. They ask for one every year. They ask for something, you know, for a schedule to write their, you know, daily goals down and to check them off. They like that. I have one who I asked for one. I bought him one and he never really used it that much, honestly. So I would just explore that and see if it helps, but it can really be a motivation for some students. My other son did his work. He just he didn't care about, you know, organizing it or checking it off. Yeah.
Some people are just not box checkers, right?
That's right. That's right. And I think it's good to acknowledge even to your students that as they are starting, sometimes you can feel like things are unfair in middle school and the world is just against you and your math is harder and your science is harder and all of this. So I think it's good to acknowledge the changes in the difficulty and the level and that it is a little more difficult, and then that you're altering and you're dropping some other things, like Jen mentioned, from language arts, some of your language arts elements, you know, just communicate that so that they know that they do in fact have some extra time that they weren't doing that they're not doing some things they were doing in elementary school. Handwriting went away completely until I had someone and their their work became illegible, and then I would bring it back for weeks at a time or months at a time, whatever was necessary to get it legible again. And so, handwriting, having that separate vocabulary if you've been doing wordly wise. Towards the end of middle school, I did do grammar through at least 7th grade and 8th grade, on the fence. Do they still need it? That's totally up to you. There's already language arts going on in your Sonlight curriculum, and whether you need that extra or not I would say that's an individual thing. So yeah, there are some things you're dropping to provide some more time for the, difficulty of the math and science and the writing assignments. So it balances.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you haven't started transitioning your kids to some level of independent work, no matter how big or small that is, it's helpful to start doing that in 4th or 5th grade with the things that they can do independently. So, maybe explain their math assignment and then have them go work on it. Or when they are still doing spelling or handwriting or things like that, have them go work on it. That way you can start to turn things over in middle school. I know my daughter is an avid reader, and she thought I was reading the read alouds too slowly. And so there were times she was like, can I just read that one? And, I just want to read it to myself. You're taking too long. Or if I got back down.
Like an oldest child.
Yes, typical firstborn, right? And so for a while, I did hand over some of her read alouds to her if she was excited to read them. And it's funny because in her last year of middle school, she came back and said, well, this is our last year that we have assigned read alouds. Can you read them to me again? So yeah, they may come back on that, but a lot of the other work she now does very independently and looks at her own IG and goes through and what do I need to learn? And, kind of preparing those kids with that expectation of, I'm going to check in with you at the end of the day. I want you to be able to tell me what you read in history, or your essay needs to be done. Your memory verse memorized by Friday, whatever it is that you're turning over to them. And then I find, that the older they get, the easier that stuff becomes. And it may be more work for them, but it feels like a lot less work for you as the parent than those early elementary years when they're still learning everything.
It becomes more like coaching and guiding than the face-to-face teaching that it was in the little years. I had 3 more kids after my oldest. And so out of hardcore necessity, I trained them to be independent as elementary school went on, just because that was what needed to happen. So by middle school, my oldest particularly, because oldest, was doing a lot of the reading by herself. And it's funny because in high school, I went back to reading a few of the literature books to her aloud just for the joy of it. She didn't need me to. It was just things that I didn't want to miss, that I wanted to be able to talk to her about as we went. Not because I thought she wouldn't understand, just for the joy of doing it together. And so after that, like middle school break where she was like, Mom, you're busy, you're tired, just give it to me. It was kind of fun to go back to, reading some of it together.
Yeah.
When thinking about what can they do on their own and what should they do on their own, I would say I've talked to the parents that do this differently, and some that say, why are you checking everyone's math? They can do that. And for me, I do check math, and my guys none of them have had any trouble in math. Math is their, even when they're better, like when they enjoy something more, they're all very great at math. And I think that I think that it was a good thing that I checked the math, because it's too tempting for a little time. If I'm away for the week, sometimes I've let them check their own math, or I've switched and let an older brother check a younger brother's math. That can be helpful. You can figure that out. But I do think that it would be easy just to kind of look and say, okay, well, this is what you do. And then you do the math. So that's something that I just preferred to do. And I'm glad I did it. And it's really rewarding now whenever my son's going to do a dual enrollment course in the fall, or he's going to do a co-op class and then a dual enrollment class. And so it's really nice when they roll off because it creates all this extra time. So that's just something that I particularly decided I wanted to do. And I check science tests and that type of thing. And reading aloud, that is something that they could do all on their own. And my oldest did exactly what you were talking about, Sunny. And I convinced him that it is good for your brain to have some read aloud. And so not just I really do enjoy it. And like Jen said, I wanted to enjoy it with them, but also if you can just explain to them that it is good for your brain to listen to a read aloud. Some adults can't listen to an audible read aloud, and it's because your brain is, and everything's distracting us in the world. So how wonderful for us to have something that can help us to listen better. I think it's still valuable even when they're in middle school, and they could totally do it on their own.
Yeah. Well, and Christy, I did the same thing you did with like checking work. Even if they could do it independently, I checked work and I realized quickly that it wasn't a math issue or a science issue. It was a character issue and an accountability issue. And, it became important to me to have kids who were willing to be accountable. Because if you're used to being accountable for your math, then being accountable for the rest of your behavior comes a little bit more easily. At least in our house, where, I was going to find out what you did while I was not looking. And that's not a bad way for a middle schooler to be, just saying.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's good for teaching them how to manage their time as well, which are skills that they need as an adult, right? If I come in and I say, okay, I'm here to see what you've done, and my daughter hasn't done that work yet, then it's, oh, I'm not ready, and now you're interfering with my time, and that could be a detriment to you later in life. So yeah, I think that is important when we say that you transition those kids to more independence. We're not saying just, okay, you're on your own now.
Right.
So you have to kind of figure out in your home what that looks like. So do you check in with them daily? Do you check in with them at the end of the week? Do you have them present something to you? I know when my daughter was doing her own read alouds, a lot of times we would do it kind of book club style, where we both would read it separately and then have a conversation together about it. And so that way we both were on the same page. And then along the lines of that time management, because we usually check in with each other every 2 to 4 days is kind of what we do. So if she wants to read at night before she goes to bed, a lot of times she will take her school books to bed with her, and then she'll read while she's lying in bed, which she prefers over, oh, it's noon, I'd rather be outside or doing something, instead of sitting here doing my schoolwork. So she kind of breaks up her time that way. What are some other ideas as far as allowing your kids that responsibility of, managing their time, doing it independently, but also making sure they are accountable to you?
Well, respecting who's a morning person and who's not a morning person, I think is huge. Sunny, I know you're like me. You're not a morning person. Am I right? I have a friend with 5 homeschooling Sonlight kids, and one of them is a morning person. And before mama even makes it down the stairs, that kid is like wrapping up and is like, Mom, I have a question. I'm trying to do this math. And her mom is like, oh my gosh, it's like 6:45. Can we just get to the T before we get to the math? And then the other kids are later in the day. I think that's a big one. I don't really math in the morning. I'm like, let me do my stuff. I'm gonna get to you about mid-morning. We're gonna start. It's gonna be great. Equally, I've had kids on my bed at 10:30 at night going, okay, so I'm doing Eastern Hemisphere. And I'm like, are you even for real? Because now it's bedtime. But, when your teenagers want to talk to you, you talk to them. The other thing that we learned about middle school time management is to work backward. So if you have soccer at 5:00 and you're going to be just zonked out tired after that, then let's work backwards. So by 3:00, what do you need to be doing? And by 1:00, what do you need to be doing? Which means you need to start by what time? And that teaches the kids to manage their time, to do that count better than just saying, now you have to do this and you have to do that. But leading them to the information step by step by step. I felt like really served my kids well.
Yeah, and as far as accountability goes, I have had to, just kind of have a direct conversation about things at times and just say, okay, this has to be accomplished. And here's where we need to be by a certain point. So just defining the parameters and, yes, we can have some flexibility in how we get there, but if you're not making progress toward where we need to be and it becomes impossible to get where we need to be, then I can't let you do that to yourself, but to where you don't want to stay up around the clock and work for you can't do. There comes a point where you can't get it in before the end of the year unless you're accomplishing things along the way and week to week kind of getting those goals met. And if you didn't finish something this week or today, then it goes first before you do anything else, regardless of what your preferences are and regardless of what time you'd like to wake up, then there comes a time where if you're not I'll give you the flexibility for that. But if it's not getting done, then we have to change things. So I think that happens sometimes in middle school too.
Oh, yeah. And I feel like looking at that annual calendar way from the beginning has served my middle schoolers really well. I travel a lot for work in the spring. And so we need to we have to be at week 18 by Christmas or else, must happen. Because once January hits, my schedule is crazy, the dad's schedule is crazy, there's extended family stuff, there's work travel, there's trips, there's all these things. And so right now, we are wrapping it up this week and next week, which is the way we need it to be because our summer schedule completely shifts, and that's going to happen starting Memorial Day. And so I've got these last 2 weeks to get all this stuff in. But I tell you what, we have been checking how many weeks we have for the whole year. So we're just about done. And now I've got a middle schooler who's like, okay, listen, we have 3 days left of this. We have 12. I kid you not, guys, 12 math problems left in the book. Mm-hmm. That was after today, we have 12 problems left. Hallelujah. But we have 4 days of this and we have 6 chapters of that and only a couple things left. And he is so excited because we are all counting because that's how we manage our year is by constantly knowing where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. It gets exciting when you get to the end and you start eliminating things and then you can speed up in other areas.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, that's what we like to do. We like to have a big celebration at the end of the year. So yeah, about 5 weeks before that, it's counting down.
Yeah.
Ultimately, with middle schoolers, you're trying to prepare them for high school. And I think oftentimes if you're homeschooling in middle school, you've realized at this point that you probably can keep going into high school. So what are some things, I feel like a 6th grader and an 8th grader are so very different in terms of maturity and what their future goals are and all of that. What are the things that you really should focus on in middle school to make sure they're ready for high school? And then how do you really make sure that they're learning enough that when high school comes along, they are ready for that?
Go ahead, Christy.
Okay. I was just going to say, I'm thinking of subject to subject. There's a little, difference. I try to get a sense. I don't want to make one time I explained to my son, you completely have the ability to do these levels in math. I don't know for high school. I don't know what you're going to be interested in. I don't know what you're going to, for certain. I know some things you're interested in, but I don't know for certain what you're going to do in college. So the thing we don't want to do is eliminate some possibilities. So I kind of explain, here's math things that we, the level in math that you need to have finished. Now, my oldest son wanted to major in biology in high school, and in college. And so he already knew that in middle school, actually. Sometimes people don't know. And he still is on the same track he was on back at that time. And that may change for people, I understand. But if you can explain to them that you don't want to eliminate possibilities by what you take in high school. And so you want to be ready for whatever your goal is. And it's just going to be so different it's kind of hard to say in a venue like this, what exactly you need, but it just look at what you need in high school for that 4-year plan and then work backwards for middle school. And that's going to be your best thing. I'm thinking specifically of math, science, the same thing. We were talking this weekend in the booth at Sonlight about what lab sciences you're taking. Do you take physical science for middle school? Most people do. Or do you, do some students take it in high school? Yes, some do. And so, it depends on goals again, what goals people have. So, I would just say, look at it, start looking, especially towards the end of middle school at that 4-year plan. And that helps you just working backwards. And then as far as requirements go for language arts, for your writing, really focusing on them being able to do the research, pay attention if you have kind of glossed over what's in your instructor's guide at any point. Not that any of us have ever done that, but making sure, just looking through the steps of the research and are they comfortable with that? Have they done that? Do they need more practice with it? That type of thing, I would say.
Yeah. And I always remind people, every state is different. Every college is different. The military is different. NCAA has different requirements for high school. And so whatever you think your plan is going to be, set your kid up so that they can meet whatever those requirements are to do whatever they want to do in high school. So know what your state requires. If you're interested in the military, know what they require in high school so that you can efficiently get it all done. And of course, every state is different. So that's super fun too. For me, like with my oldest, I worried about this a lot. How do I make sure she's ready for high school? And I realized that, of course, like Christy said, every kid is different. So some of them are doing, algebra going into high school. Some of them are doing geometry or algebra 2 going into high school. That's fine. But I wanted to make sure that my kids had mastered all of the arithmetic years of math. So, add, subtract, multiply, divide, working with exponents, fractions, all the fraction work, all the decimal work, all of that stuff, so that when they hit the algebra years, they were prepared and they weren't going to struggle in algebra because of those lower skills that they didn't have. I wanted to make sure that they were very, very comfortable with the basics of world history and American history and any map they put in front of them. So if I put a map of the world in front of you, I want you to have a real good understanding of what you're looking at. Ditto, a map of your country. Ditto, a map of, London or your city or Abu Dhabi. Like, I want you to be able to interpret what is going on any map. And I feel like Sonlight is so good with that because we're always pulling out a map every year. We're pulling out a map for everything. And so by the time they get to high school, it's super easy. But I really wanted that kind of literacy going on. I wanted to feel like I had hit everything in science. We had talked biology. We had talked electricity and physics. We had talked, chemistry and chemical reactions, that they knew basic geology, that they had kind of, we'd done nutrition and anatomy and all of those things on the elementary level by the time middle school is over. So like in my state, physical science is a standard 9th grade thing. They call it earth science, but it's really the same. That was new to me, but okay. So I didn't really worry about that in middle school. So we did like some of the extra, you're talking about fitting it all in. So we did some of the extra Sonlight science that wasn't like, okay, and now we must do this progression. So that was pretty cool. Also, I felt like, what was the other thing? Oh, writing. So I wanted my kids to be able to, knock out a 5-paragraph essay on whatever by the end of middle school. It didn't have to be, like Shakespeare or Hemingway, but it did have to be complete. It did have to be in order. It did have to be like spelled, with like good grammar, capitalize the right things, don't capitalize the wrong things. Why is that a bigger struggle than what to capitalize? Do your people like randomly capitalize like every other T? Why do children do this? Was it just mine? But so like I just went through kind of subject by subject and said, all right, like what do we need to have really conquered to set them up for high school? And I realized it wasn't very like hugely stringent, highfalutin goals, but there were definitely things that I was like, we cannot do high school until you have really conquered this stuff. And, so far so good.
Yeah, I think that's true. And you guys both kind of touched a little bit on those academics too, of like, what do you need to know?
Mhm.
And I know language arts is something oftentimes people have a lot of questions about, right? Because in elementary school, you're trying to teach those kids how to write, like it's very basic. But then you have essays, you have persuasive writing, you have research papers and those types of things as the kids get older. So how is middle school language arts maybe more challenging, or how do you modify your expectations as far as like what your child is capable of? Because obviously there's different levels, within kids too, of how they write or the types of things they're good at. And so how are you as the parent able to kind of coach them and train them on that path to help them become solid writers and have all the writing skills they need as they get older?
I think in middle school, I started using my pen more. Maybe it wasn't red. It might be purple or blue or something. It didn't have to be a red pen. And I remember my high school teacher bleeding all over my, it looked like something had died when she finished our papers. And you could think okay, this time I'm so ready for her. And still she would, like it would be everywhere. And so I didn't do that in the elementary years. I might cover the things that we, Sonlight, the little checklist,
Mhm.
what do you call them? The
Rubrics.
That's the word I'm going for. Yes. So I would do those things, and maybe I would cover it with them then, or maybe I would work it in somewhere else, where, if they were consistently not capitalizing or some of those things. But we did start working more on mechanics, and just nailing those things down. And but the guide, I think it does a good job of gradually moving up what the instructor's guide requires and the type, and kind of making that changed from just basic writing into analysis, literary analysis. Where's the plot? Where's the falling action, the rising action? All of those. Really critical thinking about what you're reading. It does a great job. Sonlight Language Arts does, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I know I consider myself more of a proofreader and scientific writer in that I can give you facts. I can tell you if your grammar is wrong. I am not a creative, fun writer by nature, myself, but those Sonlight rubrics, like you said, Christy, have helped so much in figuring out, okay, have I gone over every type of writing? Have we talked about how to do these things like
Yep.
research papers? I can write them, but I never liked doing research myself. And I felt like it made it very simple and easy for my daughter to understand. Okay, here's how we get our sources. Here's how we record them. And so it was way less intensive on me than I thought it would be. And really now as she's gotten older, I see there's not a lot of gaps as far as, oh, we totally forgot how to do this or that or whatever. She's done it all. And while she's better at her own types of writing, just like I am, she at least has the tools needed for, more challenging assignments. And go ahead. Were you going to say something?
I was going to say one Sonlight specific, language arts specific tip that really helps, I think, that I've done year to year is going to the back of your book and pulling out your 36 weeks, your scope and sequence. I love that. Maybe it's the former teacher in me, the former, classroom teacher in me, but I love the organization of that. And I pull it out and I put it in a clear folder in the front of my guide. And I use that thing all the time as a reference. And so even time management of when we're going to have a research paper that's going to require some outside of our home type of library research, internet research, something that's going to require a little more of my time to be sure, that I have that kind of blocked off. And also to reinforce whatever we're learning about in language arts, that helps me to have, and just to be sure that I'm covering all of the types of writing and, getting in what the practice that they need to get. That just pulling that forward and having it front and center helps me for every level of language arts for Sonlight. So just a little Sonlight specific tip.
Yeah, and I don't remember the exact levels, but I feel like when your child is first learning, like a research paper, for instance, the IG really holds their hand as far as this week, we're going to get our note cards. This week, we're going to do this. And then within a couple of years, it's like your paper will be due in 3 weeks. And so then they're kind of on their own. So yeah, it does feel very gradual. It's not like you go from the child just learned how to spell to now they need to be Hemingway, like you said, Jen.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit while we're on the academic subject about math. Sonlight carries a bunch of math programs, and some of them only go up through 6th grade. So if you are not using a program that's a K through 12 math program, initially about middle school, you're going to have to switch. We had to do that in our home. So what do you do if you're trying to figure out, well, what do I go to? Which math program is going to be similar to what they did in elementary school, or making sure that's a smooth transition, as you start to get into that more challenging math?
I mean, I was lucky enough to find Math-U-See like at the very beginning of my homeschool journey. So we just kind of used that. But we did hit a couple of walls and I needed something supplemental. And I will say what I ended up wanting was not something similar to what we had been doing. And that like pre-algebra level, that, pre-algebra, algebra, I think is a great time to really evaluate what your child needs now, because the math that you may have picked, 6-7 years ago, that style may not still be the same thing they need now that they're at a different level of math, a different developmental level, and you've gotten to know each other and your school tendencies so much better that I don't know that finding something similar would actually be on my agenda. I would be thinking more about like, what are our choices and which one is going to serve us best right where we are.
Mm-hmm. A big important thing we always say repeatedly about math also is when you're switching, always do a placement test. Always. And that is hugely, hugely important, because anyone we talk to that is having trouble with this is too easy, this is too hard, that kind of thing. Did you do a placement test? And I didn't really think, I kind of knew where they were, And so it really is helpful to do the placement test, and it will serve you well, but especially as you move between curriculum options. And we didn't have Math-U-See. Sonlight didn't offer that when we started. So we did start off with another math program, and we did change to Saxon, which is what one of the K-12 options. But we did not do that until the middle school years. And so it was really important for us to do the placement test and find out exactly where they were. And so, and Math-U-See and Saxon differ in that I think, Math-U-See is a mastery based, and like Horizons, that is that spiral method where you have the concepts that come around and then come around again. Saxon is similar to that. So if that helps you kind of know the difference between the two. And I will say that my son, we used a different program that Sonlight doesn't offer anymore. They did it one time just for a brief time. And my son did that program for a year, and he came and he said it had fewer lessons for the year, and it had fewer all around, fewer lessons per day. I mean, fewer problems per day and all that kind of thing. He said, while this was nice, I really want to go back to Saxon. He asked to go back to Saxon. And so he said, I really just think it challenges me more. And so I've talked to people who used that curriculum and loved it, and their kids went on and excelled and did great. And so there's nothing bad about, that curriculum. But for my son, he had an input in his math choice for high school. So maybe your kids will too as well. And they'll, I kind of help you make that decision about which one is going to be best for them. And the catalog does a really good job of, and the website, comparing the different math options to consider all of the different, what the strengths of each program, the perceived weaknesses or the, potential weaknesses for each program, I would say. It does a good job of comparing those for choices.
Well, and I think math is a really good place to know yourself and your student as well. For me, I took a lot of advanced math in school, but in my career, I've never really used much beyond a like 6th or 7th grade math level. So I was very worried about, I don't remember any of that math. How am I going to explain this to my child? And so for us, having the video instruction and answer keys that really don't just give you the answer, but show you how to work out the problem has been phenomenal, because there are a lot of things that I realized I have forgotten. But then when I look at it in the answer key, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this. And it makes it so much easier to explain that. Or if my daughter's struggling to understand, if she can go watch the DVD or the download, of Teacher Steve, she uses Math-UC, teaching her that lesson, she's able to understand it better from him than me anyway. So I think that's something really important. When you're thinking about math, is what do you remember? How good are you at math? What can you actually teach if your student is struggling?
Yeah. And along those lines, I want to say, so many people do not know about this, and I don't know why we don't highlight it more, because for Saxon math, there are teaching DVDs like the dive CDs that are available. So you watch the lesson, you do the lesson, and then you have the answer key for checking. But there's also a second product of videos. You have the dive CDs that are just to watch the teacher, and then with the Saxon teacher are the videos that it has an excellent index, and any problem in the entire book, every problem is worked at a board by a teacher. And I love that. So that because I remember this from high school, one of my worst, the things I hated in advanced math and algebra 2 especially, was that I could get the examples, I could do them all day, but then I didn't get the homework and I didn't understand it. And so this gave you that exact thing worked out fully. And so I love that. We keep it on the shelf as insurance. And, so if you're on, lesson 55, problem 10, and that's where you get stuck for the first time, you pull that off, you pop it in, and you both can watch it if you can't remember something. And that's worth its weight in gold. It's not inexpensive, I don't think, but it was very helpful to me. Once I got to a certain level, because it's behind the preschool years, it's behind the baby years, it's pretty far back there. So that was helpful. 6 to the 0 power is 1. That doesn't make sense to me until it's explained again, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to segue from the academic and, the logistics of homeschooling middle schoolers to sometimes what can be the hardest or scariest thing about homeschooling middle schoolers. And that is, as they get older, they do want to be more independent. You now might be dealing with different behavioral issues, attitudes, as they're trying to push against you a little bit more. I know my daughter was extremely compliant in elementary school, and then it was like overnight, nope, I want to do things my way. And so we've had to learn, what our relationship is now that she's a little bit older. You also have some of the socialization issues of now, I feel like in our home anyway, she really needs to be with her friends and thrives when she has those relationships, and gets to see people. So what are some issues like that, behavioral, social, otherwise, that you run into with middle schoolers, and how do you find it the best to handle them?
I mean, are there any behavioral issues middle schoolers won't throw at you? I don't know. I mean, Chrissy has as many kids as I do. I think pretty much we've seen it all, right? Everything from laziness and procrastination to just attitude, just, snotty attitude, to mean girls, to I don't wanna, inter-sibling hostility. Can we call it inter-sibling hostility, Chrissy?
That happens.
I mean, right, Sunny, not yours. Your children will be perfect the entire way through. They will never argue, but ours did. I don't know. I want to say, like, homeschooling will be the cure for all of that, because you'll have so much more influence on your kids. And the truth is, not quite. I think there are pros and cons to every stage. And on one hand, in middle school, like, being up in each other's space all day is a lot, and probably makes some of the battles more intense than if you had a 7-hour break. On the other hand, it's right in your face all the time. And so we are going to work through it and fix it. Like, there will not be any escape, which is great, because sweeping it under the rug won't ever help. I mean, in middle school, I still control the car and the computer and the phone. And so if you would like to see your friends, because I know that is desperately important to you, then that math will be done,
Leverage.
Yeah, you will stay, like, I will drive you to youth group as soon as you show me that essay, stuff like that. Leverage. And I feel like, I don't know. I got nothing. I'm on teenager number 4, and I'm really like, here's what I know.
Yeah.
Attitude will come out of their mouths or out of their pores. So any child that you can get all the way to sweaty and tired will be nicer the rest of the day to the people they live with. It's not foolproof, but, like, amen.
Yeah, and I will say that on the part about the siblings being right there on top of each other and everything, I remember in college, there was an annual talk at our university, and there was this really old-fashioned lady that was in charge of all the freshmen, and she would come in and have this talk with us. And anyway, a spring speech every year, and it had a funny name and all this. And anyway, one of the things she talked to us about, either in the freshman meeting or that spring meeting, I can't remember, but she talked to us about getting along with each other. And she said, these people are preparing you for marriage. Like, the people, look to your left, look to your right, because she had us sit together as roommates. And she said, you may think they are the craziest, they do the weirdest things, and guess what, for the rest of your life, the people that you live with closely, they're gonna do things weird, they're gonna do things a different way than you. And I will say, I do think that they learn to work through those things, because we do love each other unconditionally, and so there's value in it, even if it's hard. Just know that it is preparing them for future relationships, with not just in marriage, I think, but just their boss or their whoever, all those challenging relationships they'll have in the future. I think that will be there will be a benefit. They will grow from this, and even if it's hard on you at the moment, it's valuable. There's value in it. And and I think behaviorally, I think that the reading that we do helps me. So many times we're talking about a story, and it's safe because it's someone else we're talking about, and it's best if these things, I'm trying to think of the book that takes place in Canada, Broken Blade, or something like that. And it has the little boy where they're kind of teasing him and putting heavy things in his backpack, and it's kind of building up in him. I remember that book was really, there's sometimes books that you can find that really address some of the things that they're going through, and you don't say, hey, this will help you with your horrible attitude, but you just say, right, oh, this is a great book, I hope you like it, but also for me, there were books that I would read, and I would recognize myself. One of the books in level F that I'm thinking of, there was a mom who was just nagging, and you can kind of see, okay, she's getting nowhere by doing this. And that was helpful to me as I was doing laundry one day. I was kind of sinking in what I had just read aloud to them. So there's character development happening with the moms and the children as we go through and read these books that are safe, because they're about someone else. But the
Yes.
discussion that you're able to have maybe, and not bring it maybe a time to bring it, out where we say directly how it relates to us, but sometimes just to kind of discuss that topic of, the way people treat each other and that type of thing, it can be helpful.
Yep. And to build on everything Christy just said, because I completely agree, the other benefit that I was surprised about in the middle school years was that now the kids are old enough to be really capable of doing chores and, learning to kind of do all the things that as the mom, like, am I the only one who's been doing this job for all these years? Oh my gosh. And so, but it wasn't just doing chores or learning to bake or, whatever. It's working as a team, that they get to be on the same team. Even though they're in different grades, even though they have different personalities, even though, the dog has a favorite, like when it comes to mom is sick or grandma is on her way over right now, can you go do that? Can you go wipe the bathroom and you load the dishwasher and I'm going to vacuum. And if you'll just scoop the cat box, like then we'll be done in 10 minutes. That kind of teamwork, I think used to be really, really common in families. And I think so many of us have gotten away from it, that I really worked that to its fullest, that my kids all learned to grocery shop and to put away groceries and to prepare meals and to plan things and to, do all the different aspects of cleaning the house. And that way, when something needs to be done, I can be like, okay, deploy. And, it becomes so easy and natural once they hit the right age, and then you can do it. Did you find that at all, Christy?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And also I do have conversations with them when there's the pestering and when there is we're on each other's nerves because we're in a small space. I do allow, okay, you can use the desk in your room or that type of thing at times, but I do come back to, we love each other unconditionally. In this family, we love each other unconditionally. And I say that and we are a team, and the rest of the world isn't always going to be pulling for you, it's just not, but we are pulling for you, and we're going to pull for your brother too,
Yep. Yeah. And when you get to I see it in my extended family, like with my mom and her siblings, their parents are gone now. And, she and her siblings picked at each other as much as any siblings in the history of the world have ever done. But now they are 100% the people that they have left. And I'm always telling my kids, like, these are your biggest cheerleaders. Never in your whole life are you going to find anybody who loves you the way that we do. And so be nice and stop picking, because, you're going to need her on your team.
Yeah. Work it out. Figure out when you're going to play your guitar and when you're going to do whatever, because you don't want to do that at the same time. I understand that, but you guys work it out.
Have you been spying on my house?
And there's no, I have this happening daily in my dining room.
Yeah.
But if they learn to work it out, those are skills that they can use for the rest of their life.
Yes.
Being able to work out those kind of conflicts.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think if you've been homeschooling with Sonlight, you're used to having conversations with your kids. So I know that I have seen, like, after, whether it's my kids fighting with each other or one of them kind of pushing back on me, they know enough about, like, what the right thing is to do that we're able to have discussions after the fact. And I feel like, I could kind of see that glimpse of who they'll be in their adult life, that, we will get through this. And so it may be hard sometimes, right now, and I may want to throw in the towel or they may want to get away from me, but I can see where we've built up that relationship, and, we still have it underneath the hormones and the emotions and whatever else is happening. So I think that's important to know. Yeah. And as you can see, we all have our stories. We all experience it. So you are not alone if you're going through that. For the sake of time, we are going to have to go, but for anyone watching, I do want to invite you to join us either in the Sonlight app or in our Sonlight Connections Facebook group, where we have so many Sonlight parents, as well as our mentors and advisors, who can give you advice if you are going through a situation and need help, because we've all been there. So we would love to help you with that. Jen, Christy, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you guys adding your input and giving us so much great advice today.
Thank you.
Sunny.